Welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries, the podcast where crafting your entire persona as a lie fueled by bitterness and enjoying making the monkeys dance for your own private amusement is all just a normal, healthy part of being 16.
Is that like an official thing for this book, or did you write
No,
that?
I wrote that.
Oh, that's great.
Thanks, Will.
That's insane.
Thank you. It's accurate, though, wouldn't
the
you say?
ramblings of an insane person. Yeah, but it's
But
perfectly
accurate, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Book number 11, Too Good to Be True.
Is Suzanne as perfect as she seems?
Welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries. I am your host, Marissa Flaxbart, and with me today are two just beautiful people.
Trust her. Just
Mr. Stribling,
yeah.
W.J. Stribling.
William Joseph Stribling. Marissa calls me by my first name, and Sinead, who's about to be introduced, calls me by the abbreviation of my middle name.
Well, now that you've started, would you like to introduce Sinead?
Yeah, so sitting to my left, to the listeners, your right, would be my dear friend Sinead Persaud.
Hello.
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 Hi. Well, I'm really happy to have you guys here. I know that you know each other from college, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We went to NYU together.
Yes. Hence, part of the reason why I asked you to be here today.
Sure.
Because we have a book that featers the Big Apple.
Pretty much how we experienced it.
Oh, totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Well,
There were parties in my honor all the time.
In your honor.
Yes. So, Francine Pascal, I believe, also from New York.
Really?
So we'll visit New York in this book, which is book number 11, Too Good to Be True.
But I would just like to interject that I think a better title for this book would be Too Good to Be True, but with TWO because of twins.
Because of twins, the
Yeah.
Wakefield twins.
I just thought that it could use a
But
little-
that one, it doesn't have anything to do with the twins, the title. If it was,
That's true.
then yes.
So you guys went to NYU together, and now live in LA, and I know that you have worked together on some projects.
Yeah, totally. So our story of starting to work together again was my brother and I had written the script, Edgar Allan Poe's Murder Mystery Dinner Party. I think that's the title. Who knows anymore? And we were looking for a director. And I logged on Facebook one day and saw a trailer for Joe's new movie, Bear With Us. And I was like, this is totally the vibe we want. I wonder if there's any chance he would want to direct for us. And he did!
I got her email in the parking lot of the Staples on Sunset Boulevard. I'll always remember where I was. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I don't remember what I was buying at Staples, but I was like, yeah, I'll read it. First I read it.
Yeah.
Expecting it to be really bad. Not because they're bad writers, but because everything is bad.
Everything's
Yeah.
bad, yeah.
And then it was
Yeah.
really good, and,
Yeah. So listeners, I also can vouch for everything being really great. You guys can check out Shipwrecked Comedy on YouTube, and Poe Party specifically.
Yeah.
Or Edgar Allan Poe's
Yeah.
We call it Poe-
Yeah.
Everyone calls it Poe
It's
Party.
abbreviated to Poe Party.
Great. So that being said, are you guys ready to dig into Too Good to Be True?
Yeah, though I will say that I think I asked you to do this with me because you tweeted something about this, no?
I did.
Okay, and I just assumed that you were like a fan of the books or hadn't read
It
them.
was because we did a Twitter takeover as our characters, Edgar and Lenore, and
okay.
somebody asked Lenore what her favorite book series was, and I said, as her, Sweet Valley High.
But you had
I've never read any of
but
these
you
books.
knew enough about them.
Yeah.
To, see, I never knew that this existed until Marissa started doing her... Well, had you been doing the blog for a long time?
For a really long time,
Okay,
yeah.
So
for
I didn't know
very
about
long
them until I met you.
You knew of the series,
Right.
you didn't, but for
Did
both
not.
of you, this is your first Sweet
Yeah.
Valley High novel.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. And what a novel to start with. I feel like I say that almost every time my
Really?
guest has never read a novel before. I was thinking about that it's always the thing of, you guys, this book is way different from the other books. But if I say that every time, maybe they're all kind of like this. Let's talk about the cover, though, to get started.
Let's.
You know, on the left, I assume that's supposed to be the Suzanne.
Yes.
Not as pretty as I pictured her in my head. Because they go to great lengths, and by they, I mean the 50 writers who probably wrote this thing. They go to great lengths to make sure you know that there's never been a person on this earth that has been as
Yeah.
attractive
Right.
as
She's
Suzanne.
physically perfect, and
Right.
she, in this case, being Suzanne Devlin, the lead character of this book. Now, Suzanne Devlin is very beautiful, right? Well, in the book, she looks just like everybody on these covers looks.
Yeah.
And she's looking at herself in the mirror.
She looks like Vanessa from Little Mermaid.
Who's
but
Marissa?
She's Ursula when she becomes a human,
okay.
but she should actually look like the cartoon version because she is hot.
Yeah. Okay.
She does look a lot like that.
Yeah.
And
she's
then
doing the, like, mirror pose.
the other person on the cover is Elizabeth.
Or Jessica, they're identical twins.
Well, but Jessica and Suzanne never meet. So
And
it's
Elizabeth-
You're right, they
Yeah.
never did meet.
Elizabeth is looking a lot like a gym teacher.
Just her polo shirt
Yeah.
look. She's wearing her gold
Her
lavalier,
necklace,
which
right.
will factor into this book. She and
yeah.
Jessica have matching ones.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, the look on Elizabeth's face is
Skeptical.
Yeah.
Suspicious.
Which, that doesn't even come into play till like the last 3 pages of the
Yeah.
book. But
I think she's saying, what's really going on with this chick? That's what the look on her face says.
Yeah.
So perhaps the listeners are wondering what the hell we're talking about, because Suzanne Devlin is a new character in this book.
well, they should pause right now and go read the book. Also, there's a point in the book where you're going to want to pause reading the book and go read East of Eden, and then come
Yes.
back to this book, and then come back to the podcast.
East
Book
of Eden
section.
comes into play. I made a note of that, so we can bring that up. Suzanne Devlin is a young woman from New York City. Her father, Tom, I think is his name, is a friend of Mr. Wakefield's, and they've arranged this sort of like daughter swap.
Like not Parent Trap.
This totally
Trap.
unnecessary exchange student situation.
Right.
But
Yes.
not a student situation, because it's during a spring break,
Yeah.
which lasts for 2 weeks.
Right.
Back in 1984, I guess.
So they trade
Right?
places, but only
that's a
one
good
of the
point.
Right?
twins.
They never go to school.
Yeah.
They never go to school.
It's always on
Yeah.
break. Yeah.
That's true. They never go to school.
And in this father's infinite wisdom, decided it would be a good idea to send one of his twins, to split
Only
them up,
one.
to a
Right.
place where she would have no one to interact with whatsoever and be alone in a penthouse all the time.
In Book 10, this trip was teased. Suzanne's going to become visiting from New York, and maybe one of you two girls can get to go. You might think that this whole book would be about the decision of who's going to get to go because of all the drama that's placed
Right.
on it in Book 10. But no, just
They
the first
flip a
chapter.
coin.
Yeah.
They flip a coin, and Elizabeth wins the coin toss.
Who did not really
Yeah.
care at all about going to New York.
The book opens with Jessica just whining, pleading, please let me go.
Yeah. She says if she doesn't get to go, she'll be too depressed to ever go to college.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that she will make money as a gypsy fortune teller.
Yes.
Yeah, super
Thus
cool.
begins the problematic.
So having never read one of these Sweet Baby High books, which is
Sweet Baby High.
I've been calling it forever, and I can't stop and I won't stop.
I like it.
It's pretty good, and it should just be the Muppet Babies version of Sweet Valley and Sweet Baby High.
Oh, that's a good idea.
But they're in a normal high school. They're like baby geniuses. Anyway, not what I meant to say. I meant to say that because I'd never read these and I had been told they were going to get like insane,
Yeah.
I thought that Jessica, having been denied a trip to New York because they're identical twins, was going to pretend to be her twin sister to go on this trip and like force her twin sister to be like her. I don't know. Maybe that's something they've already done.
That's
with,
the
like,
kind
the
of
swap
thing-
of yeah, but like
That's the kind of thing that
seems-
would happen in this series.
Okay, so
for
I wasn't
sure.
way off
Yeah.
base, but I was a little disappointed that didn't happen, and
Well, Jessica has a lot of fantasies about what's going to happen when she's in New
Right.
York, which are kind of the best part of the first chapter.
Yeah.
But Elizabeth wins the coin toss. But Jessica is still scheming about how she's going to
Yeah.
get to go anyway. But one of the things that Jessica fantasizes is this. I don't know if you guys noticed this. I bet you did. Suddenly, a hand touches her arm. She turns. Pardon me, Mick Jagger says. I believe this next dance is mine.
Yeah, that was
Sorry, I
pretty
didn't do
great.
an accent. I could have. I
That
probably
sounded
should've.
just like Mick Jagger.
Oh, thank you. I did do an accent.
So we've dated ourselves a little bit.
Yeah, but I looked it up, you guys. Mick
old was
Jagger
Mick Jagger
would have
then?
been in his 40s.
Yeah, but that was honestly peacock Jagger. I don't know.
That's the least problematic thing in this book is this girl who's, how old are they? 16?
16.
Getting with Mick
Yeah.
Jagger. Also, I love the fact that they're 16, and this necklace that comes into play later was given to her on her 16th birthday, and it's like her most prized
Yeah.
possession, and
Yeah.
they make
it
it
was
seem
probably
like...
a few months
Yeah,
ago.
it was, or last week, who
Yeah.
knows?
Okay. In case you couldn't tell already, listeners, Jessica essentially cons Elizabeth into letting her go, and Elizabeth decides she doesn't really care that much. Jessica obviously cares more.
Right.
Well, Elizabeth doesn't want to leave her boyfriend.
And Jessica makes it sound like Todd, her boyfriend, is totally going to cheat on her.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Jessica makes up a story that Lila Fowler has a crush on Todd, and then tells Elizabeth, like, you can ask Carol Walker, she'll back me up.
And Elizabeth knows she's lying.
Yeah.
And is still just like, all right, you got me.
Yeah. She says, I get the feeling that I'm trying to be talked out of this trip. Or I get the feeling that I'm being talked out of this trip. Jessica takes that tiny opening and just, like, bursts through it. She's like, oh my god, Liz, thank you so much. And she runs downstairs. She's like, you guys won't believe it. Elizabeth's letting me go to New York, even though she won the coin toss.
And Elizabeth's like, I didn't... Okay.
Yeah. She's like, meh.
All right. This girl is crazy.
So, Jessica's daydreaming about what a great time she's going to have. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is super psyched to meet Suzanne. And Suzanne arrives on the plane. Their planes, like, just miss each other. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of interesting scene where they're going through the airport security. And it's like, oh, your plane's going to board any minute. And they haven't gone through the security yet.
Right.
And that's also dates the...
Also, the fact that the family was all let through security to the gate. Which, like, I remember that being a thing in the 90s. But, man, that dated it pretty hard.
So Suzanne then, her plane arrives, and she is the most beautiful woman anyone's ever seen.
Violet eyes.
And she's 16. Like, just to, you know...
Her perfect body makes Elizabeth feel that her size 6 body is not perfect enough.
Who do they say looks like a zipper if she turned to the side and stuck out their tongue? Like, what does that even mean?
I think Steven, the brother, says that about Elizabeth.
Well, you guys,
his little sister.
No, I was brainstorming a segment that we could have for season 2 of the podcast.
The Steven Chronicles. It's all about the brother Steven.
Well, we could do that. Actually, Stephen does start to factor more into these books. No, but I was thinking we could have forced metaphor.
Yeah.
And I feel like the zipper thing kind of falls into that, where she tells him that he's puny. Mm-hmm. And she says, he's like, hey, who are you calling puny? And she's like, if you stuck your tongue out, you'd look just like a zipper.
Like, I don't know
what that means. Like, I don't want to visualize that. Another
candidate for forced metaphor is the part where Jessica thinks how the boys back home are like wet clay in her hands. Which, like, I get what they're trying to say, that she can just manipulate them, but
wet clay is really messy, too.
Yeah, and those boys are,
super messy.
So Suzanne Devlin, first impressions?
Hot. Super.
Skinny.
So skinny.
Kind of like, just very sweet.
But also, like, the nicest person ever. She does all the dishes and the laundry. That's the best part, is that, like, obviously, spoiler, like, she turns out to be evil. But for 90% of the book, in her head, she's thinking, like, oh, these, like, fucking hicks, I'm gonna, like, you know, like, I can't, you know, I'm laughing at them constantly. But
she puts
outwardly,
in the work.
she puts in all the work of being a great house guest, so I'm not sure who's...
Honestly,
who's
the parents would probably still come away from this being like, she was a fine house guest.
She did all those dishes.
She makes French toast with, like,
she
lemon.
Does the whole breakfast,
And she does all these chores. She's constantly helping them out. She's so sweet to them, and everybody loves her. The boys are obsessed with her.
Meanwhile,
all the
she
boys.
hates them all secretly.
Meanwhile, she hates them all secretly, and the book is so clever, it doesn't let us into that until fairly far on when we finally get our first glimpse into Suzanne's inner monologue. And it is dark. It's not just
so
like
dark.
It's like I recently read the first Super Edition book, which was the hiatus episode, and there's a character in that we get into. She does a similar act. Her name is Courtney. A similar act to the Suzanne Devlin thing, but her inner monologue is nowhere near as dark as Suzanne's, which is just like. I hate everybody, and someday everyone will learn that they can't treat me like this. It's
these hicks, like they're so she's going through some stuff.
But meanwhile, who is she kidding? Because she's the one who's constantly nice. Like, she doesn't have a single person, I don't think, in her entire life that knows that she is evil. Bad inside. It's just all for her own enjoyment. So if you were reading this book and you were shocked by the revelation that Suzanne is actually bad.
I was not.
Well, good. I'm glad, because there's a big red flag right off the bat.
The title of the book.
The title of the book, yes, but I was actually thinking of Suzanne's name, which is, of course, Suzanne Devlin.
Like
Devlin. Like, not super creative. I was thinking about Suzanne. Like, well, does Suzanne mean something? And, you know, it rhymes with Satan, you know?
Don't.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the red flag.
Seitan beef.
The red flag I was referring to is the pink flag on the cover. There's an actual pink flag. Speaking of colors, there at one point at the end, some girl's hair is, or some girl or guy, they reference it as being carrot red. I'm like, orange? Carrot red is not they flip their carrot red hair, and I'm like, that is not red.
Just in general, I know we're still talking about Suzanne, but just a small little... The amount to which they describe every girl's good looks.
How good? Is there any ugly people?
There's no bad-looking person in this town.
Winston.
Yeah,
Poor Winston. Yeah.
Yes, Winston, who really makes a fool of himself in this book, but also then ends up saving the day. So let's walk people through it. Do you guys want to? We can talk about Elizabeth first, and then we can talk about Jessica.
Sure.
So Elizabeth is
as they all know, I'm sure if they've listened to this podcast, that Elizabeth is a normal, sweet person.
Yes.
Goodness,
if anybody
Elizabeth.
is listening to this episode still and you've never listened to an episode of this show before, just stop right now and go back to the beginning, or even just like
because we're going to set the bar too high and nothing else will top it.
That's what I meant. Yeah. One of the very first things that happens in this book that is kind of important and sort of clever, I thought, as a device, is that they go swimming at the Wakefield's pool. And Elizabeth notices that Suzanne is an amazing swimmer. Yes. It's just like on top of everything else.
She's like the Michael Phelps of 16-year-old female swimmers.
She does 12 laps.
Yeah, that's what I do when I'm just lounging in a pool. Is I do laps back and forth until you know.
Elizabeth is really impressed with what a great swimmer Suzanne is. So when, like the next day, I guess everybody in the whole fucking high school is at the lake, including Mr. Collins, who's acting as
the chaperone. Chaperone and unofficial lifeguard, which I thought was an interesting detail. That he's an unofficial. I'm pretty sure was the lifeguard.
He could be. He seems pretty great.
Yeah.
He was serving as lifeguard.
So I think that calling him an unofficial lifeguard, I was expecting someone to drown. He was like, "Yo, I was just the unofficial lifeguard.
Right.
Like, you can't put this on me."
Oh, and Elizabeth is supposed to write an article about this picnic.
Yes, that's one of the reasons that she didn't want to go to New York.
What is she going to write about?
Was that she's one of the top journalists in.
Did she also have to write about Lila's party?
Lila's birthday party, another thing that she would have missed.
Did she write about Lila's birthday?
Why is there a gossip column in their school newspaper?
Yeah,
right. And why is Elizabeth writing it? All good questions.
Right, she's like the least gossipy one.
All solid questions. I don't have a lot of answers for those questions.
Although I kind of want the least gossipy person writing my gossip column.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah.
She's gonna have an unbiased opinion. Take.
I feel like the main thing that's happening at this picnic is that every boy in the school is fawning all over Suzanne, and she's handling it really well. Like she is just, you.
But she's also very clear that she's not interested in any of these boys.
No.
Except Mr. Collins. Mr. Roger Jeremiah Collins.
So, this is a moment that I feel like the podcast has been leading up to for a long time.
Okay, they've been teasing Mr. Collins as a hunk.
Over the course of this podcast thus far, we've had a lot of guests that have asked questions about Mr. Collins.
Has he been in all 10 books?
Almost every book he gets referenced. And it's usually passing, and he's always described in these terms as being everybody's favorite teacher, not just because he's a good teacher, but also because he's fucking hot as hell. He's such a smoke show, and I wouldn't mind having him teach me a few things. Like, it gets very racy really quick.
Oh, yeah.
Which leads all of the guests to wonder what's going on with Mr. Collins. I realized that I was maybe giving Mr. Collins too much credit, and that we needed to be on Collins Watch 2018.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, then this book comes along, right after the Collins Watch segment is invented, and it is Collins Watch Central. Like, Mr. Collins...
He is heavily featured.
Heavily featured. So, what happens right away is that Suzanne is swimming in the lake, and suddenly in the distance someone sees her, and she's flailing around, and they're like, Mr. Collins, I think Suzanne is drowning.
It's Elizabeth that notices it.
Elizabeth notices it, and she's in her panic, she calls out to him.
And Mr. Collins, the unofficial lifeguard, decides, I guess this is unofficially my job to save her.
Yeah, and so he rushes out, his strong arms stroking the water, and
he pulls her in with his arm across her chest, which she was really into.
And he brings her in. So I thought, you guys are both very talented interpreters of the word. Would you be willing?
Oh, yeah.
I know it's cold, but
happening.
would you be willing to
Sure.
to enact
Oh,
the
yeah, we're
scene
gonna
of
read
this
the
book?
scene?
I thought you were
Yeah.
going
What
to say
chapter
that
is
we're
this?
both very talented swimmers, and I was like, I mean, are you going to ask
Never
us to
drowned
swim
once.
on this?
Yeah, I wish I could ask you to swim. That would mean that I had a pool. Sinead, if you could read the part of Suzanne.
Oh my gosh.
And
What a part.
Willie Joe, if you could read
Willie
the part
Joe.
of
That's it.
Mr. Collins. Roger.
Willie Joe
Roger.
strip sauce.
And I'll be the narrator. So are you ready for this?
Yeah.
A very drenched-looking Suzanne clung to him, sobbing.
I don't know what happened.
She choked.
I must have gone too far. My legs just gave out on me.
Mr. Collins tried to put her down, but she wrapped her arms about his neck even more tightly, burying her face against his muscular chest.
Oh, Mr. Collins, if it hadn't been for you, I might have drowned.
Are you all right now?
He asked.
Well, sort of. I know this probably will sound silly, but I'd feel so much better if you could just sit here with me for a few more minutes. I still feel kind of wobbly.
Mr. Collins looked uncomfortable.
If you're not feeling well, maybe someone should take you home.
Oh no, please, I wouldn't want to put anyone out. Besides, I'm feeling much better now. You can put me down. I promise I won't collapse.
She offered a shaky smile. Mr. Collins didn't argue. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're
Excellently done.
welcome.
Bravo. Bravi. I can conjugate Italian.
Show off.
Thank you. So, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that this book, and I assume the other books, is like reading the fucking Twilight Zone. Because everyone is an insane person, and everyone is an idiot, except Mr. Collins
Yes.
is the only one who behaves reasonably
Right.
or seems to understand the world that we live in. The rest of them are like trapped in Pleasantville, and Mr. Collins has clearly done something in a past life, and he has a higher level of consciousness. And
It's like they got someone normal to write his parts. And they
Yeah.
were just like,
Yeah,
okay, so we wrote this crazy book, now just insert Mr. Collins in being a regular
just like
person.
play the straight man, like I don't know. I loved it.
Yeah.
He's really the hero of these books. I assume This is-
Everyone.
yeah.
That was part of why I wanted to focus on this scene. There are more dramatic scenes than this, but this sets it up. We learn about halfway through the book that this is clearly Suzanne's plan.
Yes.
I mean, we probably knew as adults reading this book that she's acting awfully manipulative and flirty. And Elizabeth realizes soon after this, like, wait a second, Suzanne can swim really well.
Yeah.
That's weird.
She brushes it off.
She does. She forgets about it because Suzanne is so nice,
Yeah.
so wonderful. Everybody loves beautiful,
And Elizabeth
perfect Suzanne.
is so trusting.
And everybody else kind of is too. Like
Yeah.
nobody really doubts her.
Apparently, nothing bad has ever happened to these people, except every book something awful happens to
Yeah.
these people.
It's a really, really good point, Will. So then what we learn before too long that this is her whole master plan, and I think it's important to
when
set
did
up.
she concoct this master plan?
I guess
Because,
when
like,
she first lays
she's-
eyes on
Yeah,
Mr.
she's
Collins.
sees
like,
this
older
guy
man,
like he's
this is
grilling
what I
hamburgers.
do.
She's like, I'm gonna fuck that guy.
So I think
Like,
so,
right?
I think so, and it is super weird because he's a teacher and she's 16, but she's not worried about that.
No.
And what we learn,
It's a challenge for her.
yes, and she gets so much pleasure out of the control that she exerts over men. That's her thought process. Is like. So later on in the book, we can jump ahead to later on in the book. Suzanne is doing much better after her near drowning,
Right.
and Elizabeth gets a chance to go to a Lakers game. She's like, "Oh darn it! I can't go to the Lakers game with you, Todd. I have to babysit for Mr. Collins' son, Teddy."
That's when I realized it took place in California.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really know. I assumed Ohio or something.
No, Sweet
but-
Valley is right next door to Hidden Valley, where all the ranch dressing comes from.
I can understand that. Maybe so.
Oh my god, should we write that book series?
Hidden Valley.
Hidden Valley High.
That's really good.
Can I help?
That's really
please?
good.
Can the
Yes.
three of us please write Hidden
mean-
Valley High?
Well, that could just be a sketch.
That'll
of
probably
some
just be a
kind.
sketch.
I know
but, like,
who will
Hidden
sponsor
Valley
it.
High, Hidden Valley.
I know where. Yeah. It can be a tie-in.
This is not gonna happen. So
Okay, everybody watch out for Hidden Valley High. Hidden Valley, if you're listening, give us a call. My email address, I say at the end of every podcast. So, but yeah, so they're going to the Lakers game, and Suzanne, she's like, if only somebody could babysit for me, but I've called everybody, nobody can. And Suzanne like appears out of the mist. She's like, I can.
and you're like, oh no.
Oh, but that's actually after Elizabeth needs to drop off an article that she's written about.
Yes.
The
Oh my gosh,
picnic.
there's a whole other Mr. Collins
Oh,
scene
yeah, and that's...
where she enters a wet t-shirt competition starring only herself.
Yeah, she pours water all over herself.
Yeah, well, let's describe it from the beginning. Suzanne offers,
Yeah.
to, like, I'll run these papers in for you, Liz. And Liz and Todd, bless their stupid little hearts, are like, Suzanne, you are so nice. Do you ever get tired of being nice? Now, Elizabeth really likes Mr. Collins, and I would think that she would be like, oh no,
We'll go together.
I want to talk to him.
But in
He's
this
my
universe,
friend.
only one person is allowed
To get out
into
of the car.
Mr. Collins' house.
So she goes and drops off the papers, and Mr. Collins comes to the door. And
Shirtless again!
Yeah, he's shirtless, and we have to assume that the papers being dropped off was the review of the picnic from 2 days earlier.
The book describes his reaction as he has like an awkward face, and Suzanne is loving it. She's like, he knows that, he looks hot, and I'm seeing him with his bare shirt, or his bare chest. Bare shirt. A bare shirt is a different thing. So maybe a shirt like that you might sell to promote your film,
Right.
Bear With Us.
Which we have, and we don't anymore, but we did.
So, anyway, go ahead and you guys can talk about the scene.
Yeah. I think the kid, Tom,
Teddy
comes out. The
comes
only
out
character
and
that is not heavily sexualized in this
Yes.
book is Teddy.
Although at one point, Elizabeth is like, give Teddy a kiss for me, and Suzanne thinks, Teddy's not the one I'm planning on kissing.
Yeah, so
Which
he's
is a little
involved, he's
sexualized.
adjacent, but
Goodness.
I think he's spared.
But Teddy comes out and is just like, he's just seen a movie star, and fine, all right, 6-year-olds
She's hot,
do
we
not
get it,
care
yeah.
about that. And Mr. Collins is acting weird. He's like turning red, I guess, but I don't know.
And Suzanne asks to take a drink of water from the hose.
Well, she lays down
On like a little lawn
Chase
chair.
Lounge. How do you say that?
I think that's how you say it, even though it's not spelled that way.
Lounge. Yeah, it's like spelled longue. Anyway, she sits on one of them and asks for a drink straight from the hose.
And gets
That's
her
normal.
white
Yeah.
And
t-shirt
it like
wet.
bubbles at her lips or something.
Ew.
So, you know.
So she
it's-
like sensually sips water from a hose.
And then oops, it just covers her.
And Mr.
entire
Collins
blouse.
couldn't help but looking, the book
Right.
tells
Her
us.
course.
very brief bikini that she was. I read this like
Okay,
hours
yes,
ago,
a
so this
brief
is all very
bikini.
fresh in my memory.
And what's,
That's why.
That's-
I didn't know
remember
you
that.
could describe a bikini
As
as
being
brief.
brief?
I mean,
Well, there are weird terms like that. So I think that use of brief is the same way you would use like a boxer brief, right?
Right,
Like, or briefs, like as an underwear.
Yeah.
It's like there's not a lot of them. They're
Yeah.
short. They're brief.
It's-
Like
And the book tells us that Mr. Collins couldn't help but look, but then it also says that she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what, I must have slipped. And Mr. Collins says under her breath, I think you know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
pissed. Like, he's annoyed
Yeah.
at her.
she also
and he
puts
can
up
see
her
right through
legs
her.
to give him a better view, and I'm not sure. Like that's what it says, but
What?
I don't know. It says her tan because apparently
Right.
you go to Sweet Valley and you get a tan
Also-
immediately.
Right, because they talk about how pale she is at the beginning.
and how
everyone
quickly
in
you
Sweet
get
Valley is-
brown.
Yeah.
Like
Yes, that's the word. When
Brown.
Suzanne complains that she's going to look so pale compared to everybody, Elizabeth says, oh, you get brown real quick here, which it felt weird.
Strange.
didn't like that. Yeah,
So yeah, then she goes back to the car and, you know.
wet, soaking wet.
Nobody says anything
Damn.
about it.
Mr.
I-
Collins
what
doesn't offer her a
happened?
towel to dry
And
her
I
off.
thought it was so strange that Todd and Liz aren't like, hey, why
Why
is your
you
shirt
wet?
wet? But
Why
they're
you
not.
soaked?
And
Oh,
one
man.
thing that does happen that's odd in
Why
that
did that take
exchange,
so long?
I don't know if you guys, this stood out to you, was that Suzanne is complimenting Elizabeth, and she says, oh, if you guys keep complimenting me, my head's going to be too big to get out of the car. And Todd says,
What head? He says, "What head?"
he says, what head? And she like playfully swats at him, and I do not
I
get
have
it.
no clue what joke
Insult
that
is
is.
that?
I'm laughing right now,
You
but
know what? You know what that is? It's a subtle, but it's not a good joke on his part. But he's not getting any. I think, and when he's saying "what head," he's referring to a different kind of
yes.
head that he's not getting.
I just assumed
He's
it was
not
like,
getting it.
oh, Elizabeth is so like she would never think highly of herself, sort of thing. But I'm like, that doesn't. That's not like.
I think the word head struck a chord with Todd.
I like Will's version.
No,
I think
sure.
your version, Sinead, is correct, but I like Will's interpretation better.
You
But
heard
my
the word
version
head, like,
is. Yeah.
seized up a
Listeners,
little.
I'm sorry this is only an audio
What?
medium, but Will definitely seized up a little bit. And a good impression
It's a trigger
of Todd.
word. It's a trigger word for Todd.
Mm-hmm. But so then we jumped ahead already. We already
Yes.
talked about the babysitting scene.
Right.
The babysitting scene is insane. Suzanne goes over and Mr. Collins is pissed to see her.
As I would be too as a parent. I'm not a parent. If I were a parent.
If you were a parent. Yeah.
As a parent. Yes.
He knows what she's up to. Elizabeth, though, has no idea.
Right.
Nor does Todd.
But this is when Collins should have said, like,
No.
Yeah, I'm going to stay home.
Or I'm going to bring my
knows-
kid to this restaurant.
Right.
Like, get him a booster
It's
seat.
not like he had a work thing.
Yeah,
He was
Teddy
at
is
dinner
6.
with friends.
Yeah, he's
Teddy
6
is
years
not
old.
2.
He's an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could go to a restaurant for dinner.
Right.
And but Suzanne does make a big show about showing how much she and Teddy are going to have a great time.
Right.
Teddy likes her a lot.
They're going to play cat's cradle.
One thing that I think is so strange is how good Suzanne is at turning on this good with kids mode. I feel like people that hate kids hate kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's hard
Suzanne-
for them to, like, pretend they like them.
Mm-hmm.
And
She
Suzanne,
doesn't even try.
and Suzanne clearly hates kids because the moment the door is shut, she fully neglects this child.
She starts reading a magazine and she's like, can't you watch TV or something? And Teddy just starts bawling.
And he starts crying because he was really interested in a story about a turtle.
Yeah, he's like, you know the story Theodore the turtle?
She's like, fuck
I don't
no.
know.
Liz knows lots of
I don't know
stories.
stories.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And she's basically like, fuck you, kid.
That's the first time we see her
Yeah.
behave differently, right? Which I think we hate her even more because she's interacting with a child. So,
And I just think it's crazy because Teddy can tell people.
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like he's a baby.
Yeah.
Like you always. That's the whole like victim-y thing that happens in the about whether or not to believe a victim. That's a different problematic thing that we'll get to later.
Yeah.
But it's with the kid, right? Like a kid this age, when they say like an adult did like a bad thing, like you're pretty inclined, I think, to believe them because
Especially at 6.
Yeah,
Right.
like that's the age where they're pretty honest.
Right. And it's not just like Suzanne is like nowadays maybe would be on her phone while Teddy is playing with his toys. She like leaves him alone
Yeah.
in
She
a
takes
room.
a bubble bath.
and fantasizes about how Mr. Collins is going to come home and
Yeah,
see
yeah,
her in the
Bubble
bath.
bath.
How pissed would he be?
Yeah.
That's not a...
But she has this fantasy that she's wrapping him around his finger because she loves to see boys squirm in the way that she can just turn it on.
Yeah.
And like that works with high schoolers, but anyway, so
And it probably works with some teachers, probably at her New York school or wherever she went to school in Europe. I don't know.
She
went to
Europe,
boarding school in Europe.
So
This book
she was
doesn't
sleeping with
talk-
her teachers in Europe.
yeah, the book doesn't talk about her history with that, but it's hard to imagine that this is the first teacher. She even has a comment at some point where she's like, teachers are like this sometimes, thinking that they're above
Right.
it all.
So
But
something like
I'm
this
gonna
happened
crack
at
him.
my high school. Like there was an issue.
What?
Yeah, like a teacher that got fired and arrested for having a relationship. I don't know
With Suzanne Devlin?
With Suzanne Devlin.
Yeah.
No, but like that stuff happens. I don't know if it happened that much in the 80s or if people just got away with it more. But it makes it seem like this was still a big no-no back then.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Except for in Suzanne's mind. It's
Except
like
for in
all
Suzanne.
good.
Yeah.
So then it gets to be like 11:30 and she goes downstairs, finds Teddy asleep on the couch. He's clearly been crying.
Yeah.
And rather than like putting him to bed, she comes up with this plan to like lay down next to him and pretend to be asleep or something.
Yeah, she's like...
She puts on sexy romantic
Yeah.
music and
Well,
like makes the lighting really like
And she's
sexy.
like, when Mr. Collins comes home, he will...
He's gonna see me sleeping next to his child and get so horny. Like that's her plan. I want to know how old the person is that
God.
wrote this interaction.
And then Mr.
thought
Collins
this was a
comes
good
home and is immediately just like, Suzanne, get up. Like, Matt. He's like, what? Wake up.
And says, I'm going to drive you home, but
Yeah.
then lets this child, she's also a child,
Yes.
walk home at midnight.
Well, as long as we're on the subject of this babysitting day,
Yeah.
we have to point out a note that I made, Suzanne looking through Mr. Collins' bedroom.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what she does.
Yeah.
When she's leaving Teddy alone to do whatever the hell, he could be drinking poison
Right.
for all
Yeah.
we know downstairs. And I was really I couldn't remember what happened in this book. I thought maybe Teddy like got lost, and that was
Right.
it gets so much
Or
worse.
like ate something he was allergic to. I thought that, because like she finds him asleep but like red splotches on his face.
Yeah.
I'm like, did he eat a strawberry and he's
I mean,
allergic?
he's just weeping
He was
from
just
neglect.
crying.
From neglect,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
And wouldn't he tell Mr. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Well, he probably, the next
Probably
day, he was
did.
probably like, Suzanne sucks. Where's Elizabeth?
Yeah, but by that point, Mr. Collins already knows Suzanne sucks.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, the big climax of this story, well, almost climax.
Yeah.
No pun intended at all.
None.
Is that when she's looking through Mr. Collins'
Oh, I know where you're
stuff,
going with this.
the line is, the contents of Mr. Collins' bedroom, however, proved mostly disappointing. She'd been unable to unearth even a Playboy magazine.
Oh, wow.
I was expecting her to, like, be convinced that he was gay. Like, that's where this was going to go.
yeah.
Like, if he, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
He's not
the
interested in
only
me,
reason
doesn't have a Playboy, this
he
guy's
wouldn't
gay.
be
That's the only
interested.
explanation. But that's where Sweet Baby High draws the line. We cannot mess with homosexuality in this town.
Yeah.
Is it, you've read most of the books, right?
Uh-huh.
Is that ever
I
a
think
hot
it
topic?
does.
Not to my knowledge. Not
I thought
until...
it-
Well...
I did a lot
did
of
you,
research yesterday.
Did you read up to the Sweet Valley Confidential 10
Maybe.
years later?
Maybe that's what it was.
Okay.
When the series is revisited and they are adults and this book was written in like 2010.
Sure.
A follow-up.
That's a good update.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Then
But this was like height of the AIDS epidemic,
Right.
not what you wanted. You know what I mean? Like, this is a tough time to be writing children's books involving gay people, unfortunately.
Yeah. But not to write about teachers assaulting.
Not about statutory rape
No.
or actual rape.
Because what happens is Suzanne comes right out and openly seduces Mr. Collins.
Oh, yeah.
Basically says, kiss me now, and Mr. Collins is like, get the fuck out of here.
Uh-huh.
And she is like, I'll show you. You'll regret you ever spurned Suzanne Devlin,
Yes.
essentially.
And she rips her blouse, and she has makeup all over her face, and she...
Yeah. We get to see her kind of like do this, like the thing where you pass your hand over your face and you like smile and frown, like the comedy and tragedy masks. The book tells us that she's calmed down, but she's
Right.
developed a plan on her way
Right.
home. She tears
He,
her
like,
blouse.
throws her out, yeah.
She starts crying, and she goes upstairs to Elizabeth's room.
Yeah.
And is when Elizabeth sees her, the fact that her blouse is torn is actually really important because, of course, the next day, Elizabeth has to tell her father. I think I actually recorded this moment. I think I highlighted it. Will, would you read the fourth chapter of...
Yeah, this one right
Would
here.
you read the fourth paragraph
Bottom
of
of page
chapter 12?
103.
Wow, you opened
Yeah.
right to it.
It's perfect. I had no problem finding it. It began with her father going to see Mr. Cooper, the principal, who quickly notified the members of the school board. After that, the news spread like wildfire. Practically everybody in Sweet Baby was buzzing about what Mr. Collins had done to Suzanne. It was a scandal of the century, thought Elizabeth. Even worse than the time that... Sorry, I knew this is where you were going with it. I was going to bring this up. Okay, even worse than the time everyone had thought Mrs. Dalton, her French teacher, was having an affair with Ken Matthews. We don't know who Ken Matthews is. Ken Matthews could be like a used car salesman, like, come on now to see Ken Matthews. Like, I don't know. Like, why can't she have an affair with Ken Matthews?
Careful,
It's
listeners.
just a rumor.
Keep going.
But then Ken comes, okay, so at least then it had only been a rumor. This was fact.
Was it?
Yeah. There was going to be an inquiry, and that was just a formality. The truth was, things looked pretty grim for Mr. Collins.
Poor
Sounded
Mr.
like you
Collins.
were doing a little Patrick Warburton there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Unintentional.
So that is actually something that listeners or readers...
I assume that there were little nuggets throughout.
That's something that happens
Right.
in an earlier book. It's a book about Enid. I think it's book number 2, actually.
Okay.
Secrets.
Calm down with your knowledge.
Okay, well, I mean, I am an expert, right?
You are. You're
That's what I tell people.
the leading expert in Sweet Valley.
Sweet Baby.
Sweet Baby. Sweet Baby.
Hidden Valley. I'm an expert in that too. So, so it's bad for Mr. Collins, and somebody goes to Mr. Collins or reportedly has asked him, like, well, is it true or not?
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Collins is like, what's the point of even refuting this claim?
Let's not, get the police involved or get him a lawyer
Right.
or anything. It's over. It's over.
And as is typical of these books, it's not very specific about what it was that Suzanne claimed Mr. Collins did.
So this is my big question, and this ties in with another big question I have about, meanwhile in New York, there's another seduction happening. Like this whole book boils down to 2 different seduction plots, neither of which go the way the girls want them to go.
Yeah.
But in one of them, she seduces a teacher who rejects her, right? And then in the other, Jessica seduces Suzanne's boyfriend.
Well, let's talk about that.
Rejects her and then tries to have sex with her. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What is going on? Like, what did these? Is this so pure that these girls just wanted to kiss these guys?"
I don't know what Suzanne wants. It definitely seems like she wants more than that
Suzanne is
him.
like from New York and Europe, where everyone's just having sex with everybody. So,
and I feel like she's definitely had sex with Pete.
Sure,
but also I think that for Suzanne, it's not even really about the kissing or the sex. It's more about the manipulation.
Yeah.
She doesn't want. So she's taking out vengeance against Mr. Collins.
But how far would she have gone with Mr. Collins? If Mr. Collins was game to have sex with this 16-year-old in front of his sleeping 6-year-old, like how far would
Suzanne
I think Suzanne would have gone there and then used that to fuck with Mr. Collins.
Right.
Like lorded that over him.
She would have just like, how far can I? Because she's obviously in control.
Well, now that we've alluded to it a little more, we might as well talk about Jessica and what's happening in New York.
Yeah. So Jessica arrives in New York and is like, amazing. This is amazing. I love it. And then
she's like eating fancy meals at the Russian tea room,
and then she's like alone. Well, the parents are kind of absent. She goes shopping with Mrs. Devlin
at Saks Fifth Avenue, but she's upset,
chain smoking and not eating.
Yeah, Miss Devlin. It's like she barely touches her lunch, and she smokes these skinny brown cigarettes. And Jessica's like, no wonder she's so thin. She doesn't eat.
Yeah.
And I loved the line about that Jessica kind of liked Mr. Devlin. He seemed jovial. Mrs. Devlin, when she hugs Jessica, Jessica gets nothing but a draft of cold air, or like a cold draft of perfume.
So it's just like
cold draft of perfumed
air.
And I love how much Jessica, by the way, is a terrible person.
Yes,
but y'all know that. Jessica goes to Saks and is like, I'm going to buy my sister a present, right? And she finds a scarf or something, and it's like $75. I wouldn't even spend it on myself. I'm going to go get some free samples for my sister, and then tell her that I paid for these free samples, free vials of perfume.
Yeah,
and then she goes and spends a bunch of money on herself.
Yeah.
So.
And so Jessica, then one day, a handsome man who stops Jessica's heart practically shows up.
He must be like 20 years old.
Like 20 years old.
Who drives a Ferrari.
Yes.
Gross.
In Manhattan.
Disgusting.
That's not normal in Manhattan?
It gets very cruel intentions from this point on.
Yes. So she is actually really trying... Much like Suzanne, actually, Jessica has this method. There's a real interesting parallel here, as you were alluding to, Will. Jessica is like, I'm gonna, mold him like wet clay, like the boys back home.
She's bad at it.
Yeah, she's terrible. And the boys that she's dealt with are, like, goons. Like, they're sweet baby goons, you know?
Baby goons.
And
Pete is a 20-year-old man
20-year-old.
in New Hatton.
New Hatton. That's what they should have called it. And they're going to make up names of places.
And he shows up with these tickets to a concert, and Jessica's like, I like concerts. And Wade's like, oh, you like Chopin? Or like, he talks about Chopin and like
Name
the
5
latest
of his songs.
Yeah. It's like he talks about the latest Chopin album, and Jessica's like, oh, that was really interesting. And he's like, really? You thought it was interesting? And I thought it was jejune, I don't know what he says, but essentially, he's like, you have to play it with heart. And she's like,
heart.
Oh my god, totally.
That's
She's like bad at improv, whereas like I believe Suzanne would have been able to like
lie her way through.
So she
Pete sees straight through Jessica.
Yeah.
He calls her little Jessica. She's an adorable little bumpkin.
He's fucking with her so bad, and she hates it.
But he's the Mr. Collins, because Mr. Collins is like no nonsense with Suzanne, and Pete is like no nonsense.
But with Mr. Collins, it's like a professional. I don't want to go to jail thing. With Pete, we don't really know.
Yeah, he's a mystery.
Yeah,
there was a point in time when I was finding myself thinking, I wonder if Pete's gay.
Yeah, like what's Pete's deal?
Pete McCafferty.
I also thought
is his name, by the way.
Is this even Pete? Like, I don't trust anything in this book.
Is he a criminal?
Like, I don't know. Yeah, is this some guy who's like, here's the Devlins have a hot young thing coming over. He doesn't even, what's great is that he comes in, never says who he is. Like, Jessica has no reason to know that Pete is the name of Suzanne's boyfriend because there's no texting or cell phones or talking. She talks to her sister on the phone
She
once.
doesn't know if he's Suzanne's boyfriend.
But she alludes, she's like, even if he is her boyfriend.
Right.
You
She
know,
doesn't
which
give a shit.
She
Yeah.
doesn't give a shit, but like the fact that, I don't know, it was a little strange that she didn't ask, like, who are you?
So they go to the concert. There was a real sad moment where before the concert they go to dinner at Windows on the World.
Which is at the top of the World Trade Center.
Yeah, and I looked it up and it was like, oh yeah, that was a real place that was open until 2001. So
Man. But
that was sad. And also dates the podcast.
Yeah.
Or dates, sorry. Also, and
Dates
also
the podcast post 9/11. This is a post 9/11 podcast.
And
Oh, we missed the part where, is this the date where she wears one of Suzanne's dresses?
this date, she puts on Suzanne's makeup, first of all, which seems like not a good idea.
She cries because nothing she brought
She brought
is fancy enough.
She brought
Casual dresses.
She finds that it's like too juvenile.
But one that had like a weird neck, a weird collar.
I actually thought it was kind of interesting that Suzanne's clothes fit Jessica
because we know that she's a size 6 and that Suzanne is a 0.
She has no fat on her body.
She's got no fat.
I mean, and I'm not exaggerating. It literally says in the book
no fat.
that she has no fat anywhere, which
so,
doesn't sound sexy, but whatever.
They never point out. Oh, by the way, she's popping out of this dress.
And like by this time, she knows that Pete is the boyfriend.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just known.
And she's all pissed off because she's made herself look amazing. More makeup than usual. She's so hot. She's gone overboard. And Pete doesn't say anything until finally he's like, oh, is that Suzanne's dress? And Jessica lies and says Suzanne said that she could have the from her closet, which is not true.
She should have known that Suzanne's friends would recognize her clothing.
A couple of other fun things happen with Jessica in New York that are kind of funny, like this dinner party at Evelyn's in her honor.
And no one cares about her at all.
No, and it's all these rich kids talking about what they're going to do when they come into their money.
All the diamonds they're going to buy.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You're going to need a whole room for your diamonds.
Yeah,
like,
and
what?
how they only date 25-year-olds or whatever. Jessica calls home to talk to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is accidentally kind of a bitch. She's like, we're having a great time. This is before all the shit hits the fan.
Right.
We're having a great time here without you. And then, like, when she finds out about Pete, she's like, you know, be careful. Remember what happened with Scott Daniels.
Yeah, it's all happened before.
This is all
This is Twin Peaksing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Remember that time that you let on that guy and then he tried to have sex with you and you weren't cool with it?
It's happened like
I bet that's
4
gonna happen.
times. And the Scott Daniels one was just the worst of the times.
Wow.
Her first time is not going to go very well, I think.
Well, and it is like she thinks so much about how much she's going to lure him in, and they go on this carriage ride, and he's still being very cold to her, but she's, you know,
like snuggling up on the carriage,
But then she finds out he's only hanging out with her because the Devlins asked him to.
Yeah, so she's like, trying even harder too. She is she's really disappointed, but it's like she feels so rejected, I guess, and she wants to prove herself.
She's just like crying in front of him, and for all this, this all happens over the course of 2 weeks. Jessica cries a lot. She's a lot of
super emotional.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening with Jessica is that they go back to the apartment, and I thought it was interesting at this point, Jessica is so sure that Pete is not into her that when Pete wants to come back upstairs, he thinks it's just to say hello to the Devlins.
Right.
And then there's no one at the apartment. He gives her an alcoholic beverage.
Oh my god, alcohol. Jessica gets blackout drunk in this book, you guys, at Evelyn's party.
They keep filling up her champagne.
Yes, and that's when she calls home to talk to Liz.
Wasted.
And she's like kind of she's lying and saying that she's having a great time because she doesn't want Liz to know that she's not having a great time.
Right.
And she talks about Pete, but she doesn't let on that Pete is not really into her. She's like, oh, one of Suzanne's friends threw an elegant party for me, but doesn't talk about how she passes out and she like doesn't remember anything from when she was like had her head over the sink to when she was in a cab back to the Devlins.
They just put her in a cab.
And we don't really know what happens, like how she got out of the cab.
That's never happened before in these books. Blackout drunk.
Well, that's fun.
And of course, remember, 16. They're 16. So,
but in the 80s, that's closer to like 19.
Is that what you think? I don't know.
With inflation,
I don't think so. I think
the way they're treating all this stuff, like, it made me feel like, I mean, I didn't drink in high school.
No.
Well, me
I
neither.
think I know.
We were probably the exception.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, we were all
I hear about
nerds.
like Sarah's.
I only drank with my family.
Escapades, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, but it's interesting to compare high school lives with like party people.
Yeah,
I was in my friend's basement watching like the BBC Pride and Prejudice every weekend.
Yeah, I was memorizing every line to Airplane and doing, high school music.
I was at like rehearsal for everything.
Yeah.
as we all probably were. So, but anyway, the end of the story, fast forwarding to the end of the Jessica story, to get back into where we entered this point, and then I guess we'll probably have to wrap all this up with a bow because there's just so much to talk about. Jessica is alone with Pete, and suddenly
he starts making out with her.
Yeah, he's all over her, and she's like, I can't believe he's kissing me.
Yeah.
And then it's like immediately clear that he's interested in a lot more than kissing.
He's got one hand going up, one hand going down, is, you know,
and
really
it's
going
like
for it.
She can't breathe.
And she can't breathe, and he pins her to the floor and, like, clearly says, no, get off me.
Yeah.
And there's
a crash. I think they break some stuff.
This is not the catharsis that I wanted in any way.
And he says to her, this is obviously what you wanted.
Oh,
You've been throwing yourself at me this whole time.
I wanted her to be humbled, like they had some ugly kid who lived down the hall who had one arm and like a wonky eye, and she falls in love with him and he kisses her. That's what I wanted to happen.
I like that ending. Never gonna happen.
No,
but
Pete tries to rape her.
Even after she confronts Pete and she pushes him away, and
he's laughing at her.
Which is very much like what happens with Scott Daniels.
Okay,
in the book All Night Long.
Okay, which what? We're only 11 books in. How?
I know, it's bad.
Jeez.
I know, this is a very racy book series.
Side note question, just as a someone who's not read all of them, are they perpetually 16 years old?
They are.
Oh wow.
And so
this goes on for 20 years.
This is the Twilight Zone. They're trapped.
Yeah.
People are trapped in these books.
How can so much happen to them?
You can track where you are in the school year by the explanation for why Stephen is home. It's within one page turn, it's like Stephen, her brother, who was home for the weekend, and then the next page is like Stephen, who was home for spring break.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have to explain why Stephen's home. Obviously, he's
just around.
Yeah, he's around all the time.
When my brother was in college, he took the train in every weekend to do his laundry. I get it.
There's this moment where Jessica really reveals in the scene her youthful innocence, because what she says to Pete when she's at her peak of being angry with him for attacking her, like attempting to rape her, is, I hate you. I never want to see you again. You're the meanest person on earth.
Oh my gosh.
The meanest person on earth.
Yeah.
None of this should be happening.
And so, but he's like, fine, fine, bitch. Like, you're not going to give me what I want, but I'm going to give you one last goodnight kiss. The goodnight kiss you deserve or whatever. And he's like on top of her, and then the Devlins come home.
And she breaks a bunch of glass.
Yeah, she breaks,
smacks her head.
And
she, multiple times she smacks her head on like a coffee table or something.
So at least he's caught.
Yes,
so,
but there was a chance because the Devlins,
but is
Mr. Devlin's fine. Mrs. Devlin, I don't know. I feel like in this weird Cruel Intentions world,
she's sleeping with Pete.
Totally, or she'd just be like, "We'll never talk about this again."
Maybe.
Well, clearly he's not punished for it. They were just like, never see our daughter again. It's like you should have gone to the cops.
Right, he gives a lot of money to the school.
Oh, I'm sure that's what it is.
Yeah.
When Jessica comes home at the end of the book, and she's telling Liz what happens, she basically decides that she's never really going to tell them what really happened.
There's no resolution. They're just like, well, we both had a great time.
So Liz is like, tell me more about this Pete fella. And she's like, Elizabeth says, he sounds breathtaking. And Jessica says, oh, he's certainly that. And then thinks to herself, how could I catch my breath with him on top of me?
And then that goes on again. Doesn't she say something
there are several things
that?
like that. Every lie that she tells, then she thinks about how it's technically true. And it's all horrible.
Yeah. This weird
metaphor. She's like, oh, tell me what happened back here at home. The mom and dad didn't say anything in the car. Like, why? Why didn't they talk about the scandal of the century that happened in
Poor
this
Mr.
town?
Collins. Well, let's talk about how that wraps up.
Okay.
Throughout this whole story, Elizabeth is looking for her gold lavalier.
Right.
Yeah. And Suzanne is going out of her way to help Elizabeth find it. They don't know what happens. Elizabeth knows she just helped on her best.
Yeah. Suzanne stole it.
As soon as it goes missing,
we're like Suzanne's
okay, well, she has.
Moments before we find out that Suzanne has stolen this necklace, she's telling some of the other girls at school that she's a witch. And she's just joking. Like, they're all, it's like a funny conversation. And she's like, I'll have to come show you my magical potion sometime. And then when she thinks to whatever she thinks to herself when she's feeling this gold necklace in her pocket, it's very much like
she's like
a lovely evil
trinket, just for me.
So she's the kind of psychopath that takes a token from every kill.
Yeah,
like that's
Liz is because she pulled it off again. It's just she's manipulating everybody.
Yeah. She's like, Elizabeth would never think that her sweet friend Suzanne would take it.
She even asks Elizabeth if it's valuable, and Elizabeth is like, not really, but it's sentimental value. So she knows that it really hurts Elizabeth's feelings that doesn't have her necklace.
Yeah.
So after everything happens with Mr. Collins, there's constantly this, like, this question of, well, that doesn't sound like something Mr. Collins would do, but there's no way, like, why would
Suzanne lie about this? And then, right before this party,
everybody in the school, like, in their little friend group, decides that what they should do for Suzanne is buy her a blouse.
Well, no, so they arrange a meeting where they're going to go to someone's house, to Kara's house, right, to decide what they're all going to buy when they pool their money for Lila, whose party they're going to.
It's for Lila.
It's for Lila.
Lila's money.
Because she's rich. They're like, they have a whole meeting where they schedule, and Suzanne was not there. We don't know where Suzanne is. She's been at Elizabeth's side the entire time, and for whatever reason, we just lose her for a whole half a day. Whether we go to Kara's house for fun, let's plan. They never talk about what they intend to buy Lila, and instead they go, you know what? Fuck Lila. She's rich. Like, let's buy something for Suzanne. We love Suzanne,
and she's been through so much. Let's get her a nice blouse. That'll make up for what Mr. Collins did.
Ripped her blouse. Remember?
Yeah, so Elizabeth gets this blouse. She puts it in Suzanne's suitcase.
Hide it as a surprise. Like, she'll wake up tomorrow morning and finish packing and then go, what's this strange piece of clothing in my bag?
Oh, you accidentally put your blouse in here.
And then,
but it's wrapped. It's wrapped.
Yeah.
We do know.
So she finds the necklace, she puts it on, and then she's like, I think that maybe something's afoot here.
And then Suzanne sees her in the necklace and is like, that little witch went through my face. Oh my god.
And also, Elizabeth goes to Mr. Collins.
Her open suitcase. And the necklace was apparently visible. Like, it caught her eye.
Pretty stupid criminal, Suzanne is. But maybe she wants to get caught.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows what a bitch she is or her secret anger. So finally someone's going to get it out of her.
Serial killers, they want to get caught, right?
Their clues.
So Liz goes in and talks to Mr. Collins, and she just is convinced, you know what, I don't know why nobody's gone to talk to Mr. Collins sooner, but...
But also, if we're going to put ourselves in the shoes of this teenager... If a teacher at my high school was accused of having a sexual relationship with a student, my parents will not let me go to this guy's house.
But it's the 80s. They can do whatever.
This is true. They all just drive their sons around.
Stranger Things times. People are just getting abducted by aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. In the 80s.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Good times. Simpler times. Then they're at Lila's big birthday party, which is a whole fancy thing. Like, everybody's all dressed up.
There's a coat room.
And everybody's there, and in the coat room, Elizabeth has a conversation with Suzanne where Suzanne is like, comes out with it and also says, like, now I'm going to make things even worse for you than I made them for Mr. Collins. Very quickly spreads a rumor
that she hit her head again.
Yeah, that
and you had told me about that book, and that was
where Elizabeth was coming out of a coma.
Is that the one that Alex did the episode for, where the motorcycle accident?
Alex Jennings?
Yeah.
It is.
Okay, that was the book that I was initially supposed to read, which is why you had
Dear Sister, book 7. Where
that would have been a good one too, but
it's amazing.
This is a great one.
So
I laughed out loud multiple times reading this book. Just like stuff. Can I just little diversion real quick? Just the end of chapter 3. The last line is, it's Elizabeth sighing, and she thinks to herself, Jessica's probably having the time of her life. Chapter 4, Jessica felt as if she'd been hit in the chest with a sledgehammer. And it's like, I burst out laughing.
That's a good thing,
apparently it's good, because it's the next thing is that she meets Pete for the first time, and she's just horny, and he's the sexiest man in the world. But, I don't know, the back-to-back there, that juxtaposition really got me good.
Well, I feel like we're getting into a place where we could be in the part of the podcast where we talk about boys.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
boys, yes.
Oh, the beautiful boys, the beautiful boys. I'm in danger of losing my head too.
So, Pete is like a sledgehammer to Jessica's chest. She's in love with Pete.
Which is a good thing.
Pete McCafferty.
It's what you want out of a boy.
That's what I want.
But meanwhile, back in Sweet Valley, we've referred to how the boys are all fawning all over Suzanne.
They're singing her songs and writing "I love you, Susie" in toilet paper.
Yeah. The one who is the worst is Winston.
Is he the worst, or is he the best?
He would be named Winston.
Well, I actually think...
What's his last name?
Egbert.
Oh my god.
Winston Egbert. So here's a little passage about what's been happening. Ever since the picnic, the Wakefield's phone had been ringing almost nonstop. Elizabeth had jokingly threatened to keep score. So far, Tom McKay had called twice. Aaron Dallas 3 times. Mr. Cool himself, Bruce Patman, had asked Suzanne out only once. Elizabeth smiled every time she imagined the look on his face when Suzanne turned him down. The frontrunner by a mile, however, was Winston Egbert with 12 calls, not counting the night he serenaded Suzanne from out on the lawn.
Oh, poor
That's
Winston.
like assault at this point. It's bad.
Yeah.
So that's what the boys of Sweet. That's what's happening. It's not. This whole book is kind of about boys, but that's what's happening with the boys of Sweet Valley this time around.
Yeah. Well, clearly, Sweet Valley is a sexually repressed town.
Yes.
No one is ever getting any release of any kind, and they're
But
being.
the girls are so hot.
The girls are incredibly hot, and all the boys are pretty attractive too, except for Winston. Even the adults are.
Right.
They talk about how Steven gets his good looks from his dad.
Right.
There's literally Winston Egbert is the only unattractive soul.
Pretty much, but he saves the day despite being a kind of a nightmare in this book.
He overhears the conversation.
Yes,
with Suzanne and Elizabeth,
and we don't find that out at first.
Right.
All we know is that
Why does he overhear it?
he's hiding in a coat.
He's hiding in a coat. Yeah, that's the greatest thing ever.
So he overhears Elizabeth confronting
man,
Suzanne
genius.
and hears Suzanne confessing. And what he does with this news is that when there's this big fight where Suzanne is trying to gaslight everybody into thinking that Elizabeth is back in her coma craziness.
You're so unwell. Yeah.
And is obsessed with Mr. Collins. She tells Carol Walker, who is the gossip, who tells Caroline Pierce, who's even a worse gossip, and everybody is like this rumor swirling around that Elizabeth has hit her head again. Suzanne's really trying to play into the fact that everybody thinks she's so sweet and make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
And
if she wanted this plan to work, of turning everyone against Elizabeth, I think, and she never would have thought about this because she doesn't know Jessica, she should have alleged that Elizabeth was really Jessica in disguise.
That would have been so good.
And everyone would have been like, that sounds like Jessica. Yeah.
And that would never have been a way to prove it, really.
Right? You can't prove it because DNA test, A, doesn't exist at the time, and B, even if it did, they have identical DNA.
There's a freckle on somebody's shoulder. So they would have
But
had
you
to...
don't even know which one
I
it
don't
is.
remember,
Yeah,
no.
He's got the freckle. But you can fake a freckle.
You can. And so Winston then comes through fawning all over Suzanne, and he's like...
Who's in this, expensive silk white sexy dress.
Always white. It's a weird thing.
Sexy white dress.
Is he holding wine?
Punch. It's punch.
Okay.
Yeah, in
He's
my
like-
brain it was wine as well.
He's like,
Everyone's just always drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of drinking in this book.
Yeah.
In fact,
But it's all in
Suzanne
New York,
asks...
right?
No, Suzanne asks Mr. Collins
Oh, right. She tried
to
to get
give her a
wine.
drink before she goes
Aren't
home
you
from
going to offer me a
babysitting.
drink? And he's like,
No.
what?
And when he's
It's like a classic Mr. Collins, where am I? Who are you people?
when he's like, I think you're a little bit too young for that. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, come on, I'm more
drink all
mature.
the
And she's like,
time.
and he's kind of like, that's not the point. The fact that you're mature is not the point of why I'm not going to give you alcohol right now. You're 16.
5 more years.
Teddy, we're leaving.
So
We're moving.
We were getting into a different school district.
we're really keeping everybody in suspense here. What does Winston do with the punch?
He spills it all over her white dress. And Suzanne flips out, as we know she's going to.
She can apparently hold it together and keep this gaslighting ruse, and just the ruse of her life of being a perfect, adorable, sweet person, until the ugly boy spills on her dress.
Right.
Yes, and how weird is it that this was apparently Winston's plan all along? We
If
find
one
out
of the other
later.
boys had spilled on her dress, she would have been fine. But because it was the ugly boy who had already called her 12 times and sang to her.
So I guess I don't really mean all along, but it was his plan from when he overheard this speech, which we don't learn until later. But yeah, it's how strange is it that this is the thing that gets everybody to see the truth.
I did not see that coming.
Not only that Suzanne, it was a big twist. Basically, if listeners are confused, it is a little confusing because by virtue of the fact that Suzanne is mean, very, very mean to Winston and bursts out, little twerp, you've been annoying me, you suck, and he has been annoying. But just because she does that, suddenly Aaron Dallas, who was her date that night, is like,
I'm
out.
Walking away, and then she starts yelling at him, don't you walk away from me like that. And then everybody's like, guess she lied about Mr.
Elizabeth.
Collins.
Everyone just collectively goes, oh, God damn it, she totally lied about Mr. Collins. Oh,
they all know now.
Yeah.
And then, then she goes home.
Yeah.
And then we never hear from her
and then
ever again,
what is going to happen with her and Pete? Are they just going to talk about the evil things that they did? And they're like, we
her
still
and Pete
love each
are gonna
other.
be fine. Yeah, they're just have to
Did she
sneak
ever
away.
come back?
I don't think so.
No? She sucks.
Do we hear like about someone in New York like
Yeah.
dying in a murder-suicide, and it's like Pete and
But honestly, I like her and find her more interesting than Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica's the worst. And the
So
fact
if
that,
she
that these
stayed-
readers have to like put up with Jessica for 350 more books, it's like I'd rather have Suzanne because at least
Yeah.
she's intelligent.
She
She
stirs
might
the
be
pot in a
awful,
fun way.
but she's like an evil genius.
Yeah.
Whereas Jessica is just a mean moron.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh my
so
god, I like Chopin. I think it's good.
you guys are leading me
love
like a horse to water into the section of the podcast where I ask you, are you a Jessica or an
I'm a
Elizabeth?
Jessica. I'm sorry, I hate myself. No, I'm not.
We talked about this before
Yeah.
recording, and we're both Elizabeths. Although
Yeah.
I'm probably more of a Winston Egbert in real life, and she's more of a
An Enid.
An Enid,
Yeah.
yes, I would have said that too.
Right. Yeah. I'm just like the steadfast best friend who like kind of stays out of the drama, but will help out
Yeah.
if someone asks me to.
Yeah, Enid had she was pretty sane. Aside from the obvious
At one
living
point-
in Sweet Valley House. Yeah.
At one point, Carolyn Pierce tells Enid about the rumor that Elizabeth has been acting weird lately, and
Enid's
Enid
like,
is like,
"What?"
I don't think so. And Carolyn
Yeah.
is like, don't you even know your best friend?
Like, yeah,
and Enid is
I do.
like, slow your roll, bitch.
I do know my best friend.
Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean you should go around telling other people
Yes.
as if it were true.
Totally.
And so she's the one, Enid is the one who tells Liz, like, there's this
Right.
thing happening, so...
But as
Yeah.
terrible as Jessica is, it's very sad to me that Elizabeth constantly makes excuses for her. And Todd is onto this. He's
Yes.
not cool with it at all. But multiple times in the book, like, Suzanne says something like, oh, I really wish I had a sister. And Elizabeth says, well, you haven't met my sister. She's the fucking worst. But, I love her, but if you've met her, like, you would hate her. So, she pretty much says that a few times.
Trying to play both sides of it.
Yeah, so I'm like, we need to make a
Yeah.
decision here.
And one thing about Jessica that I feel like comes up in so much media, and having gone to school in New York City, is the appeal and the allure of New York City at the beginning of this
Yeah.
book that Jessica has that I just still do not understand to
No, I
this
don't get
day.
it.
There's a really funny line about that when Jessica is fantasizing about what it's going to be like to be in New York. I hear there are tons of exciting men in New York. Lila was there last summer, and she said they were everywhere. And Liz
Like
says,
Pokemon. There's one.
Those are homeless people.
but then Liz says, just watch out. One of them might try to snatch your purse.
Yeah, right?
Real talk.
Yeah. One
It's
of those,
true.
one of those exciting men. So
They're
yeah.
not there. I didn't.
You didn't find too many
Find
exciting
too
men
many.
in New York. I'm
But
sure they're
I
there
can't
somewhere.
speak. I can speak for myself as a 16-year-old. I was not fantasizing about like women, right? I wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh man, I can't wait to meet women when I go to New York on vacation.
Right.
I assume that you, as a 16-year-old girl, would also not be thinking like,
No.
oh man, men. Am I right?
Mick
Like,
I was
Jagger.
just
Yeah,
really
right?
excited to go to the film school
Right.
that happened to be in New York City. Honestly, being in New York was less about, oh my god, it's the big city, and more about like,
That's cool.
I don't want to be on a quad.
Yeah,
with,
I did not
fraternity.
want
That's what
the
I was
frat
excited
life,
about.
you know?
Yeah. But like the fact that New York is played up as this crazy city of dreams in all media is pretty
It's
weird to
insane,
me.
Yeah,
I think Jessica would be super into frat life
yeah. Oh
Yes.
sure,
for like
for sure.
a month until
Yeah.
it all
When
went
Jessica
south.
goes to
Of
Sweet Valley
course.
College, which
Sweet Valley University.
It's real.
is that what it? I feel like they call it college.
No, Stephen goes to
ABU?
Sweet Valley College,
Oh.
as does George.
Oh,
yeah.
but there is a university.
Later
that she
on, there's a
goes to.
series called Sweet Valley University
Got
that
it.
they go to. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure she, that's really where she has her sexual awakening.
Probably.
I hope.
Let's hope that she waits that
I just want
long.
them to be safe.
Is this where we start talking about like the rape culture of this book?
I think we should save that for extra drama. But for now, I just want to thank you guys both so much for
Yeah.
being on the show.
Yeah,
I do. This book was a doozy, right? Did you guys
this was a
love
good
it?
one.
was
I
a
really,
fun ride.
yeah, it was super fun.
I couldn't believe it.
It's kind of amazing what this book is able to make out of such a
Yeah.
thin plot.
Uh-huh.
Like another
Yeah.
girl comes to town. Thank you so much for being on the show, Sinead, Will.
You're welcome.
Listeners, welcome back to Sweet Valley Diaries for Season 2. To find out what's going on with the show, you can always check out sweetvalleydiaries.net. You can find me on Instagram at Sweet Valley Diaries or on Twitter at Sweet Valley. Send me an email if you have thoughts about this book or about Sweet Valley High in general, sweetvalleydiaries@me.com. I want to thank Jocelyn Schofield for the song Beautiful Boys. And I want to thank you for listening. Now is the first time ever where I'm going to say, rate and subscribe my
Rescribe it.
Rate and subscribe my show.
Smash that rescribe button.
Yes, please rescribe to my show on iTunes and write me a review. I just saw that today I have a 4-star review that says my show is decent. So that's nice.
Pretty good.
Yeah. I have also a really super glowing 4-star review that says that I'm amazing. But there are 5 stars, you guys. 5 stars is the max. And I would love to have 5 stars. But really, I just, I want your love and support and subscription.
And I want your subscription. You can follow me at WJ Strobelight on Instagram and Twitter. And where's Sinead?
I'm at Sinead Persaud on Twitter, but you can't probably spell that.
Persaud.
And how about for Shipwrecked?
Oh, we're at Shipwrecked Comedy on Twitter and Insta and the YouTube. Shipwrecked Comedy.
Isn't your Instagram different? It's Sinead Persuade.
Yeah, I'm Sinead Persuade.
That's easier to.
That's much
But
easier.
definitely look up Shipwrecked on YouTube.
Check 'em
There's
out.
tons of awesome stuff to watch, and it's really fun. Nerd
Literally
stuff.
nerd stuff.
Y'all know you love that nerd stuff. Listen to a book podcast about books from the 80s. Love you.
Love you.
Oh my god, bye.
So does that mean meet Miss America?
Francine Pascal can't be real. Right?
She's real.
She's real.
Oh,
but
she's
she
more real
presides
than
over
you or
the
I.
Ghostwriters.
But the writer doesn't even have his or her
They
name
do,
on the
though.
cover, though.
Oh,
You have
but
to,
it's
like,
Kate Williams.
Kate
They're
Williams?
all
Again,
written by
another
Kate
fake
Williams.
name.
Yeah, is she the only ghostwriter? Or is she another
How deep does this
Ghost.
go?
Maybe she's a ghost.
12 and up?
12 and up.
I know, right?